My name is Ayele Bekerie, and I taught at Makale University for the last 10 years. Before that, I was an assistant professor at Cornell University. I was actually a director of the undergraduate program for 7 years in the Africana Studies and Research Center. I got my first degree in Ethiopia at Haramaya University at the moment. Then it used to be called Alamaya College of Agriculture. And my second degree from Cornell University in agriculture, and then another master's in Africana Studies. And I did my PhD at Temple University uh, with a focus on ancient African Ethiopian history and civilization. And I've Ethiopic writing systems, and I have also several research articles already published.
Okay, thank you for that. So, what's the situation in Ethiopia right now?
The situation in Ethiopia at the moment uh, is not good because we are at a stage of a war that literally reached almost 2 years. Even though the Ethiopian National Defense Forces were able to repulse the TPLF, which actually caused the war, and then there are evidence for that, including their own statements. Even though they attempted to go all the way to Addis Ababa to overthrow the government, they were not successful. They were repulsed back. And the same thing when they first in November 4, 2020, when they tried to, in a surprise attack, tried to the North Command was attacked and several soldiers were killed. And their attempt was, of course, to take over that military base and then use that to kind of, go all the way to Addis to overthrow the legitimate government that we have. So at this moment, especially in the northern part of Ethiopia, there are battles going on in several sites, including in the Afar region, Amhara region, and also within Tigray, because it seems to me at the moment there are certain dissident voices emerging within Tigray, because the people are suffering as much as the people in Amara region and Afar region are suffering. There is food insecurity, a shortage of food, and then food cannot be transported because TPLF is blocking the passing of food to the needy people. So therefore, in a nutshell, we can say that we are in a deep crisis. And at the same time, in relation to that, we have also external pressure, not in a positive way, but in a negative way, trying to undermine the government, even though the government is willing to cooperate with, United Nations, and then especially, United States. We see extreme interventions to undermine the state, to weaken the government, and then add to that, because of the war, we have inflation. Living conditions are really kind of becoming hard for ordinary people who live with fixed wages or with fixed salary. So the economy is not in good shape. So we have all these scenarios, but at the same time, what is positive about the situation in Ethiopia is the fact that the people are united. The people are determined to make sure that this na- ancient nation, this very historic country would survive the challenges of her sovereignty and then continue. So therefore, the people are united, very much united. And that's the key as far as I'm concerned, even though there are certain places where the lackeys of TPLF are attempting to kind of create trouble, create problem, but I think the people are united, and so that's very important.
Okay. You mentioned foreign actors. Can you elaborate on?
This um, war is imposed on the people, really, because it one, you have a nation state, and then there is another one to become a client state, particularly to the United States. So that clientelism is the one that pushed TPLF to challenge the state, challenge it in such a way that they tried to dismantle the military first, because that would allow them to take over power. It's a kind of a really sophisticated coup d'etat. That's what it was, an attempted coup d'etat, because it failed. So therefore, that determination, that kind of bravado, come from the fact that they were kind of pushed by outside forces who felt that the Abiy government is not in their favor. And then we also see a phenomena in which that rivalries among the regional countries, particularly Eritrea, Somalia, and Ethiopia, is no longer there. They are kind of trying to form some sort of regional cooperation that enabled them to utilize their resources in a larger scale manner, and then they were able to kind of make sure that they benefit from the geopolitical opportunities that the area provides. So therefore, that invited United States to feel like that they should somehow weaken, or if possible even change the regime in Ethiopia. So for that purpose, they kind of identified TPLF as their client state. So therefore, the intervention comes in various forms. One, you see the United States, particularly the US State Department, making statements that are virtually the statements of TPLF. Like, for instance, asking the Amharas to leave Walqait, or what the TPLF called Western Tigray, but in actuality, that's historically it's not part of Tigray. It was incorporated in Tigray after they took, just before, prior to they take over power and started ruling the whole country as a vanguard party. So therefore, the U.S. statement started to reflect the statements of TPLF, which is of course an indication that they have sided with TPLF. And then they used various means, like, for instance, the media. The media was kind of, in a very coordinated fashion, was releasing misinformation, and then they were doing it on a continuous basis, like, the major media, print outlets, and then some states in the United Nations, for instance, they attempted to pass a resolution. The Security Council met for 13 times with regard to Ethiopia. And then in all those 13 times, they were not able to kind of pass any resolution, because Ethiopia obtained support from veto holding powers like China and Russia. So you have uh, the media, you have also different policy institutions and organizations. You have United Nations, you have US, and then you have also, including, countries like Ukraine. I don't know what we've done to Ukraine other than buying their wheat. Ukraine, uh, and then Estonia, Finland, um, Ireland. They were sponsors of all the 13 resolutions I just mentioned to you. So therefore, all that intervention, and it didn't stop. At the moment, the Congress has already drafted a bill trying to kind of impose more sanctions on Ethiopia. And so therefore, you have this incredible collaboration. On the one hand, the internal forces, on the other hand, the external forces. That whole attempt is to really kind of dismember Ethiopia, this ancient country, this modern country established by sacrificing that the people have paid in the Battle of Adwa in 1896. So therefore, you have all these forces coming together in an attempt to kind of change government. And then ironically, this is the first time that we have a democratic state. We had election in June, and then because of that election, we were able to establish a democratic process. So therefore, even if they feel that there should be change, the change has to come from within on the basis of the desire of the people. So the people have voted a government. There was an election, a legitimate election. One, two, the government was in the process of liberalizing the economy, allowing private individuals and private organizations to kind of get involved into the economy. So it is really ironic that the two sanctions, HR 6600 and S 3199, one in the House of Representatives, the other one in the Senate, are kind of designed, they kind of title themselves, the bills are titled as stability, democracy, and so on and so forth. Actually, the Ethiopians have already voted, their voice was heard when they voted in June 2021, and therefore they have to respect that. Ethiopia's sovereignty has to be respected. So in a way, what we see is like we have entered into a new era of all these big powers, major powers, trying to kind of impose their wills on countries like Ethiopia. So that's a form of neo-colonialism, and that neo-colonialism has to be stopped, and it should be stopped not just simply by Ethiopia alone, but by kind of combining our forces, our determination with the determination of other African brothers and sisters, because what happened now in Ethiopia could happen elsewhere in Africa. So therefore, I think it is time now for us also to, embrace Pan-Africanism and see this issue as an issue not just simply for the government, not simply an issue for Ethiopian people, but it is really an issue for all Africans. So therefore, we have to kind of reinvigorate Pan-Africanism and fight to make sure that Africans will be and should be in a position to determine their future without any external intervention.
So it's really shocking to me that they want to get rid of the prime minister.
Yeah.
But can you comment on, do you see continuity between the Trump administration and the Biden administration, or do you see differences?
Well, I think this phenomena, in terms of systematically working to undermine the nation state in Ethiopia, that's different. Trump was kind of self-ambitious in a sense that he was aiming to get nominated. He was nominated for Nobel Peace Prize, and so therefore he was kind of doing some policy activities, like, for instance, trying to normalize the relations between the Arab states and Israel. And also, he wanted to do a favor to Egypt by kind of bringing Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt to the White House in an attempt to kind of make them agree to some kind of deal. Uh, it didn't work out because whatever he has put together was really an attempt to favor Egypt, against the interest of Ethiopia, and Ethiopia didn't agree, and then he just lashed out, against, he lashed out, and made all kinds of silly statements against Ethiopia. But here, with Biden administration, we see a pattern, a determination to really bring about regime change. And that's exactly what we see. And in this particular two, the bills that I just mentioned are done in very systematic, coordinated manner without even presenting the draft to discussion. The leaders of the committees, the foreign affairs committees of the Senate, as well as the House of Representatives, are the ones who kind of agreed upon and rushed it to be introduced in the Congress. And of course, there are various steps that have to be taken before this bill becomes law. So I think also in terms of, as I pointed out to you earlier, the root cause of the war, this almost 2 year war between TPLF and the federal government, characteristically civil war, very destructive. Uh, that war, when it started, the Secretary of State of the President Trump, the former President Trump, Pompeo, came out and said it started by TPLF. So he admitted that, at least. And of course, as I pointed out to you earlier, TPLF itself has also admitted that they did it in an anticipatory manner. That's the word they used. They did it in an attempt to preempt, the inevitable invasion. But in actuality, they are the ones who started. They are the ones, and so they started the war by trying to destroy the North Command of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces. And why North Command is the vast majority of the army, as well as its weapons, are located in Tigray because of, in those days, the war we had with Eritrea. But Eritrea is no longer an enemy. It's no longer a foe. It's a friend. And in fact, Eritrea's support, logistical support, was critical for the army to regroup itself and then entered Makale within 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And then you see, and the same thing when they also regrouped themselves and tried to kind of go all the way to Addis to bring about regime change. They were stopped at a site called Showarobit, close to 200 kilometers south, north of Addis Ababa. So they were repulsed and returned back all the way to Magale. And so in all those two instances, the government actually declared ceasefire, unilateral ceasefire, because conditions were so bad for millions of people who are displaced in the Amhara region, in the Afar region, as well as in Tigray. So it was necessary for World Food Program and US aid and all these international organizations to help the people who were suffering. I mean, incredible suffering. And then, this is what we are seeing. I think the civil war wouldn't have continued until now. It would have ended if there were no external interventions, especially the Biden administration. The Biden administration hostility to the present nation, to the government, doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. I really do believe that they've made a miscalculation by kind of putting all their eggs in the TPLF basket, because TPLF was removed from power by popular resistance in 2018, and so therefore they should have taken that into consideration, and then they should have also kind of they should have given weight to the feelings, aspirations of the Ethiopian people. That's a big country, my friend. It's 120 million people that we're talking about. 120 million people, 85 linguistic groups. So their way to kind of proceed is by respecting the ability of this nation, a multicultural, multilinguistic nation, to be able to stand together by having a nation state, not a client state. We cannot afford to have client state. We cannot afford to kind of divide up the country, because that would be the outcome would be really very poor. The outcome would be not good for any one of the groups that are fighting now. So unity is critical, unity is important. And then the outside intervention is trying to dismantle that. As you asked me, in a nutshell, what you see is a form of scramble for Ethiopia. That's what you see. That's as just like the scramble for Africa of 1884, 85. Now you see this amazing scramble. So they were kind of felt, because they assumed that the Abiy administration is weak, because they assumed that, they felt that this is the time for them to kind of dismember it, and then make the resources that you find in Ethiopia easily, readily available for them. So the external intervention is kind of, in a way, the Biden administration is attempting to be opportunistic. But as I pointed out to you earlier, the people voted, the people expressed their voice. They said, we want a democratic process, and that process comes from us. Not, it's funny that all this attempt is being undertaken after, we put in place a democratic process, a tradition, a new tradition. So this is exactly what we see. It's unfair, it's an overt, it's aggressive aggression, overt aggression against our country. So the fact that they're utilizing international organizations and some states, like as I pointed out to you, Finland, what have we done to Finland? What have we done to Ireland? What have you done to Ukraine? These are the countries that they are kind of mobilizing in the United Nations to vote against us. So therefore, the same thing with this Human Rights Commission in Geneva. The Human Rights Commission in Geneva is now trying to send investigators to Ethiopia. And it was done in a secret manner without even consulting the legitimate government. And Ethiopia, of course, was not willing to cooperate. So you see the media, the state, the major powers, all in one, trying to kind of attack Ethiopia, in the process of attacking Ethiopia, of course, saying no to the cooperation that is being established among Ethiopia, Somalia, and Eritrea. And then, of course, as I pointed out to you, the geopolitics importance of the region made United States to become even more aggressive, because United States is fearing that China is kind of having upper hand. China is penetrating Africa, and so therefore they wanted to stop China's penetration by first dismantling the government in Ethiopia.
Yes. Well, first of all, I happened to be in Ethiopia the week when the popular movement emerged in favor of the Abiy Ahmed candidature. And so it really is, as I said before, it's baffling. But the other baffling thing also is that, after all, it's the TPLF that um, negotiated deals with China. But
Yes.
as you, that's another ironical thing. But as you pointed out, I guess the game is to sort of dismantle the country so that and in the process, weaken the China factor or China presence. But focus on in terms, what are they after?
Oh, well, first, the big resource is water. The big resource is water. And then, as you know, the source of Blue Nile is Ethiopia. And 85, 86% of the water that you find in Sudan and Egypt comes from Ethiopia. So therefore, Ethiopia at the moment decided to utilize this water and then decided to build a dam, which was totally rejected by Egypt. And Sudan at first was agreeable and later changed its mind because, in my opinion, Sudan has become a client state and then actually is a playground for uneducated generals. Those are the ones who really kind of now all of a sudden bend themselves. They bend themselves too much to kind of say yes to everything United States requested. So therefore, that's one, water, which is critical. And as I pointed out to you, not only that we're building dam to generate electricity, but we are generating electricity and utilize it within the country as well as uh, sell it to the neighboring countries who are also in need of electricity. So that's really one major strategic economic activity that Ethiopia is undertaking. The other one is, of course, we have a very rich agricultural land where we are a coffee originated in Ethiopia, and then we are the major exporter of coffee, sesame, and then, by the way, in the present time, teff, which is a seed that you use to make a bread, Ethiopian bread called injera, is also something that is highly sought after. It's funny because coffee is becoming increasingly expensive, even though Ethiopians are the largest consumers of coffee in the world. In addition to that, we have certain strategic minerals. Like cobalt, and then there is this another mineral, I forgot its name, which is utilized for making cell phone. Um so that, and then in the very, very recent time, uh, major oil and gas was discovered in the eastern Ethiopia and in Somalia region. And then actually, not only it's discovered, they were in the process of one building a pipe that would go to Somaliland as well as Djibouti. Uh, so we were in the process of actually, exporting natural gas because the deposit is very high. Uh, uh, Tantalum, I remembered it now.
Okay,
Tantalum, yeah,
coltan. Yeah.
yeah. Coltan. See, we are also number one in Africa in terms of livestock, cattle. Uh, we have the largest number of cattle in Africa. And so we export hides and skins.
So the way forward.
I think this war has to end, but the war has to end in a just manner and not in a kind of, dealing that really undermines uh, the possibility of having lasting peace. So therefore, just, those who've committed crimes, who've destroyed the schools, the hospitals, who've raped thousands of women, who forced millions of people to be displaced, they have to face justice. That's very important. That's the only way that we can bring lasting peace in the region. So therefore, that's one way forward. We can't just simply cover up all the atrocities and the crimes that have been committed. In Afar region, in Wallo region, I mean, in Amara region, as well as even within Tigray. So those have to come out and then be investigated. And then second is, I think what the Ethiopians have done in June is to be commended, is excellent for them to kind of, cast their vote and started a democratic process. And that democratic process has to continue. And no political organization should be allowed to grab that power by force. I think that has to stop because we have had it for a long time in our history. And third, I think United Nations have to be United Nations. Okay, it has to serve all the sovereign nation states. It shouldn't be a kind of a spokesperson for one or two major powers. If they don't do that, then I think the fate of League of Nations could also be the fate of United Nations. And I think, to me, in some ways, Ethiopia has to be careful in terms of choosing her friends, and then making sure in a multilateral kind of world that we live in, it is not really wise to kind of uh, ally with one or another major group. And then see those are, I think, kind of things that I see to see forward, for the way forward. And then I think, and final analysis, I'm optimistic, and then I think things will be uh, will be improved. And then I think hopefully, we have to do uh, continue the struggle. Though we have to continue to provide information, to be critical of those forces that are attempting to kind of disseminate misinformation and disinformation. And then we have to also fight to block the passing of this uh, uh, bill in the Congress, because sanction is sanction. If you don't punish your friend by passing sanctions, because sanctions never worked. It doesn't really affect those who are in power. It doesn't affect the elites. What it affects is the ordinary people, and the ordinary people should not suffer. And so therefore we have to fight to make sure that these bills don't pass. And I thank you.
Okay, well, it really has been a great pleasure having this conversation.
Thank you for having me, for offering me this opportunity. Thank you very much.